let's begin with the larger frame. The larger frame is that regardless of who has been in power, whether Democrats or Republicans, the institution of the university has changed to the point where it's not even recognizable anymore. So you have a massive chasm between the faculty and the staff, and I really feel uneasy even about that hierarchical distinction, and the managerial class. You increasingly have a cadre of people with bloated salaries that manage these educational institutions as if they were corporations. And they look at the faculty as impediments, right? And so here's where my story comes into the picture. When they fired me, they basically said, as an academic, you still have your academic freedom. You could go make any assertions you wish. But when you're in a leadership position, you have to think of two things. Those two components are part and parcel of your job description. One is exercise of judgment, and the other is standards of welcome, that you need to create a welcoming place. And I just find it so interesting that when they pull the lever, it's always in favor of Zionists. But in terms of how that penetrates every layer of academic interactions, I mean, there's so many cues as to don't say anything, be silent. And it ranges from the implied all the way to the explicit. The public health school here literally told faculty that they cannot mention the word Palestine, even though they made statements when Ukraine was invaded. The former president of this university has gaslit and made false statements about students that were protesting against Israel, and constantly weaponizing the idea of Jewish safety, even though most of the students out there, a good chunk of them were Jewish students. And so yeah, it's a very pervasive climate. And can you blame them? Because the adjunctification of the university was done precisely to stifle free speech. When you have the privilege of tenure, which when I started speaking out I didn't have, now I do, you tend to give yourself more space, more room to criticize. Most of my colleagues, half of my department, more than half, they're adjuncts. They don't have much freedom and stability. This is a freedom of speech issue. When corporations, you're at the mercy of their, deciding you're gone. And the university, which was one of the few coveted positions where it came with protection, the way tenured professors retire and then they're replaced by adjuncts, financially it benefits the university, and also those adjuncts know that they're walking on eggshells. So do you think they're going to criticize Zionism? I think that story I have told so many times, that the war begins, I send out 2 emails offering commentary, because my position required, in my opinion, my understanding of the role of that position is to speak to the public on matters that are relevant to them, that are important to them. And then following the second email in which I had characterized Zionism as cancerous, I was dismissed. But the beginning of the story also just shows that there was tension from the outset. Because when I was asked to direct the center, it was midway in the genocide that Israel was conducting, has been conducting in Gaza. And as someone who was born and raised in the Middle East, I am hyper aware of how people of my background often pitch themselves basically to undertake these roles, the overseer class. They want to be in positions of power and essentially help the capitalist industrial complex to control, police, and manage that region. And then in the process of doing that, they basically lend legitimacy, authenticity to that process. I was really hyper aware. I did not want to fulfill that role. I had a problem with even the center existing, I mean, these are all Cold War era configurations. Empire needing knowledge of these places in order to bring them under their domination, and so they carved them up, you know, East Asia Center, South Asia Center, Middle East Center.
May I interrupt briefly?
Of course.
Are you aware? I wasn't aware. I looked online, and apparently the Jackson Center, do you know who Jackson was?
Yes.
He was an ardent Zionist.
Yes, of course.
Okay, but so you, there's your umbrella right there. And so in terms of objectivity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a school named after a warmongering senator, and I'm not saying that you can judge everybody in that school according to that. You can judge all the faculty and the research. I mean, there is a plurality of voices in there. And this is precisely why I was never keen to, I never resonated with this idea that in a leadership position you represent the school. This was something that I was constantly told, that you need to represent the school. You're not just a faculty member anymore. You're more than that. And I would think to myself, well, what is the school's position when it comes to U.S. imperialism in the region? When it comes to the genocide that Israel-U.S. are conducting in the region? Does the school have a position? Can anybody, even the president of a school, speak on behalf of the institution? So then I just proceeded to share my own view, because I was the director, not anybody else. But the gist of it is, to me, that place needed to be cleansed of the Orientalist foundation, that there needs to be even a place called the Middle East Center, where pundits and experts and diplomats and professors come and talk about the people of that region under the microscope of national security or even cultural studies. And so that ambivalence, that tension, instead of relegating it to the background, I put it front and center, and I'm proud of that. I am proud of doing that, because that's how these centers, and this is the only way you could run these centers, and even then, it is still ethically compromised. It's morally compromised.
But you're a marked man now. You know that. You're a target. And can you discuss the kind of negative feedback you've got? I know there's, I saw online there's a couple of apparently Jewish Zionist media people, radio personalities, who are already on you, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, could you discuss the costs of sticking your neck out for what you believe?
I mean, the cost is on my health, on my mental well-being, the fear of being, picked up by ICE, even though I'm a citizen. That has happened to citizens. The cost of probably being unhireable anywhere in the U.S. and maybe elsewhere also. But these are small costs. The real cost that I paid was when I decided to criticize the Iranian government in 2009 with the crackdown on the disputed election protests, when I spoke out against the persecution of Baha'is, when I spoke out against the persecution of the LGBTQ community, and I'm not able to go back safely to my homeland, and that's the real cost. This was nothing. I'm willing to lose my job for speaking out against oppression. And when you look at Iran and when you look at the US, the scale of oppression is so out of whack. The US poses a planetary threat. I mean, just look at this war. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz impact and has already impacted millions and millions of lives. It just shows the demonic and reckless nature of a dying empire that is completely unchecked and unrestrained from anything, international norms, pragmatism, nothing. They don't display any signs of self-restraint.
I've seen your emails, they're online, and I'll make a link to them that got you in trouble. And you underscored in the emails that they were your opinions and not the department. You did do that.
Yeah.
And could you discuss that? that you're not basically allowed to voice an opinion about where you were born, Gaza. I mean, basically, and this is a broader, much broader issue. I've talked to a lot of scholars. There increasingly, it seems, under the Trump administration, is more and more repression of academic freedom and free speech, particularly when it comes to the Middle East.
100%. Let's begin with the larger frame. The larger frame is that regardless of who has been in power, whether Democrats or Republicans, the institution of the university has changed to the point where it's not even recognizable anymore. So you have a massive chasm between the faculty and the staff, and I really feel uneasy even about that hierarchical distinction, and the managerial class. You increasingly have a cadre of people with bloated salaries that manage these educational institutions as if they were corporations. And they look at the faculty as impediments, right? And so here's where my story comes into the picture. When they fired me, they basically said, as an academic, you still have your academic freedom. You could go make any assertions you wish. But when you're in a leadership position, you have to think of two things. Those two components are part and parcel of your job description. One is exercise of judgment, and the other is standards of welcome, that you need to create a welcoming place. And I just find it so interesting that when they pull the lever, it's always in favor of Zionists, the default, right? Because I was using judgment when I said Zionism is cancerous, and that judgment is in favor of life. And when I said Zionism is cancerous, I was extending a welcome to people whose families are literally trying to survive the bombardment on Beirut and on Gaza and on Tehran. And so it's so easy that they try to create these false justifications in order to basically co-opt you, insulate you from the faculty, and make you one of them, part of the vapid, kind of institutionalized creatures that are empty suits, in my opinion.
Well said.
I don't mince words, sorry, not in that business.
Okay, this thing about cancer, that's the thing that is highlighted a lot by your critics. And before you answer, and I'd like you to explain in detail, if you will, your rationale for it and what you meant by it and how others interpret your calling Zionism a cancer. I looked online, and the Bar-Ilan University, and a professor in Israel, the vice rector there, called Hamas a cancer. Hugh Hewlett at the Washington Post was a professor, called them a cancer. Another guy at the Times of Israel called them a cancer. Playing with the word cancer more concretely, Israel destroyed Gaza's only specialized cancer treatment. In this July, Iran accused the U.S. of bombing near a children's cancer hospital. In 2013, Israel's Minister of Defense, Moshe Yaalon, called the Palestinian threat to be like cancer. The Anti-Defamation League reported on the Jewish ultra-Orthodox group Nutora Karta, leaders of the group called Israel Cancer. The Times of Israel featured an article by Natasha Peen, the executive director of a group called Stop Anti-Zionism. The article was entitled Anti-Zionism, it's a 4-stage cancer. It goes on and on and on. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. And in this month, Donald Trump, referring to the Iranian leaders, I don't know if you even have seen all these things, and presumably the millions
May I read that?
Yeah.
The part about him?
Yeah. And eventually, this month, Trump said, referring to the Iranian leadership, right, and presumably the millions of followers over there, right, he said, quote, this is Trump, "These are evil, sick people. We have to root out that cancer. That cancer, you know what you do? You've got to cut out cancer early. And that's the way I feel." So what I would throw out to you is the double standard of that in the popular discourse. Do you have any insights on that? I mean, you were crucified in large part for the issue of cancer. You use that as a metaphor for Zionism. So could you, I throw all this at you, could you...
Maybe if I actually said it in a certain tone and voice, I wouldn't have gotten in trouble. So if I came out and said, excuse me, Zionism is cancerous. And by the way, speaking of cancer, you got to remove it fast. You got to remove it fast. You got to beat it like a dog.
That's a pretty good trump.
10 years of experience, you know, unfortunately this cancerous tumor has been part of our political body for 10 years now, longer than that. Look, the point you established is actually is how I was going to begin, so thank you for that, is that medical metaphors are extremely common, right? There are also Israelis who have characterized Jewish leftists as cancerous. You know, an Israeli official characterized J Street, which is a down middle of the road advocacy group in Washington D.C. as cancerous. So all of that, put it aside. For me, it's actually the very why I said cancerous was actually is itself a challenge to metaphorization of this conflict. I sent that email days after Israel hit an oil depot inside the city of 9 million inhabitants, creating apocalyptic scenes. Little kids' lungs burning, their eyes just watering. And the long-term effects of this are just unknown, but you know they're giving millions of people cancer. And so when the director of the Jackson School called me to dismiss me, he said certain constituents in the Middle East Center feel under attack by your comments. And I said, you know, I just can't do metaphors today, because the only people under attack are those in Beirut and in Tehran and in Palestine. I made certain constituents feel uneasy, feel challenged. I didn't attack anybody. And so this idea of Zionism as a theory is exactly how supremacy works. Like, it's people who used to say the Confederate flag is not you know, a sign of supporting slavery or anti-blackness. It's just my heritage. Yeah, and your fucking heritage was slavery and anti-blackness. You can't decouple the two. So when people say Zionism is just a political theory of Jewish self-determination, they are leaving out the second half, which is through the displacement, disposition, and constant policing and managing of Palestinian people, of the Lebanese people, of Syrians, of Iranians, of Iraqis. And so if it were just Jewish self-determination in a region where the population wasn't transferred to, where people's homes were not destroyed, where people were not kicked out of their homes, certainly not 750,000 of them, and that original sin was never rectified, nobody would take issue with that. But that's the matter. So I absolutely stand by that comment. In fact, if there's an apology to be made, it is to cancer, because so many people survive it. You can't say the same about Zionism. And also, the last point I'll make is, I called Zionism cancerous. I did not even call Zionists cancerous. Political ideologies are not the same thing as people. And so that's my explanation.
How widespread, you're not alone obviously with your experiences, how widespread is the effort in academia to stifle free speech when it comes to Zionism in Israel? What's your experience? What have you heard from others?
It's profoundly entrenched. It's profoundly entrenched. I mean, just think of the very core of this empire is itself built on genocide and enslavement. So of course they want a settler colony that was populated by Europeans, and they want to defend it, you know, until their last breath. That makes a lot of sense. But in terms of how that penetrates every layer of academic interactions, I mean, there's so many cues as to don't say anything, be silent. And it ranges from the implied all the way to the explicit. The public health school here literally told faculty that they cannot mention the word Palestine, even though they made statements when Ukraine was invaded. The former president of this university has gaslit and made false statements about students that were protesting against Israel, and constantly weaponizing the idea of Jewish safety, even though most of the students out there, a good chunk of them were Jewish students. And so yeah, it's a very pervasive climate. And can you blame them? Because the adjunctification of the university was done precisely to stifle free speech. When you have the privilege of tenure, which when I started speaking out I didn't have, now I do, you tend to give yourself more space, more room to criticize. Most of my colleagues, half of my department, more than half, they're adjuncts. They don't have much freedom and stability. This is a freedom of speech issue. When corporations, you're at the mercy of their, deciding you're gone. And the university, which was one of the few coveted positions where it came with protection, the way tenured professors retire and then they're replaced by adjuncts, financially it benefits the university, and also those adjuncts know that they're walking on eggshells. So do you think they're going to criticize Zionism?
Back to those emails that got you in trouble. One of the things I recognized, or I realized when I read them, is you criticized not only U.S. and U.S. policy in Israel, but the Islamic Republic. You actually touched, and I guess the question I would have is, what's your philosophy? Doesn't seem like you teach particularly any issues on Israel or Zionism or the Palestinians, right? You're a linguist in large part, it seems. But what would your philosophy be in teaching controversial issues in a classroom? I mean, this is what it's getting at, because people are going to say, oh, here's this professor and he's a bigot, and he's one-sided, all that stuff. So what's your general philosophy of how you would handle a controversial issue in your class?
Oh, just roll the tape on any university provost or president talking about their institution, perhaps, to the, welcoming the incoming, class of 2029. And they love to talk about how we tackle controversial issues. We like to debate. No, they don't. Look at how the institution intervened to make sure that there is no debate. There were so many ways to handle this. The director of the Jackson School could have said to the students that complained, there was 20 of them that complained that I was...
20 of them?
20 students complained in a petition that I was anti-Semitic.
This is the origin after your emails?
Yes.
Okay.
And of course the petition in my support garnered 400 signatures. But
do you know if they're all Jewish, or does that matter to you?
They all have Ashkenazi names, and none of them frequented the Middle East Center, and none of them were even...
They were not your students, probably.
No, they were not. None of them were my students. But, they, whatever, you take it at their value. Well, I would have loved to be given the chance to sit down and talk to them. If the university is a place where, we debate controversial issues, and I put out my story, and I was very transparent. Very transparent. I even told the director of the Jackson School, on the phone in our last conversation, I said, I will speak about this publicly and I plan on bringing legal action. The university has been hiding, literally hiding. They don't meet with anybody, and they keep repeating the same line. This is a personnel issue. And so controversial issues that are rooted in evidence-based scholarship should be the bread and butter of any university. I mean, this is what we do. But going back to my criticism of the Islamic Republic, this is what I do in the classroom. My research is on culture and nationalism in the 19th, 20th centuries. And so I go after Hindu nationalists in India and how they frame Arabic and Persian as, other people's heritage. These are invaders. As you know, India is being accused of genocidal intent towards their Muslim population, which is bigger than the entire Middle Eastern population. I go after Iran because the Islamic Republic is the world in which an Islamic Republic can be possible is the world that the United States has created, where a crony capitalist government can just kill their own population with impunity. When you look at the IRGC, it is modeled after our military-industrial complex. They give out loans now. They're entrenched in society. The bazaar class, the merchant class, is reliant on them. The sanctions have made them wealthier and more corrupt. And when you compare it to how entrenched the military-industrial complex is, I mean, this institution itself is such a part of the military-industrial complex that you say that the big evil is the U.S. and Iran is the little evil that is trying to replicate that model on a much smaller scale. So my criticism is always at the root cause. And so I have no problem criticizing the Iranian government. I criticize anybody that has an anti-life model rooted in extraction, domination, and expansion of this imperiled planet.
Okay, that's the question I was going to ask a little later. The only things Americans in general probably know about Iran is it's a, quote, repressive regime, unquote. What's your sense of that? I mean, to what degree is there? It seems like you're actively burning bridges in terms of your morality.
Not bombing them like the U.S.
So what's your stance on that stereotype or not?
It's a statement of fact.
Okay.
It's a statement of fact. The Islamic Republic is a repressive government. The problem that the United States, from the outset of the establishment of the Islamic Republic, had was not with its Islamic part or its repressive part, was with its republic part. That it was calling for autonomy, for self-determination. They just overthrew a puppet government, barely a puppet government. It was a one-man show in the figure of the pathetic autocrat, the Shah, whose son is making him look good, which is quite a feat. The part that the U.S. didn't like was that these people are saying, and are actually bringing into fruition, a plan and aspiration to take control over their productive capacity and their natural resources. Now that is completely separate from being repressive. You could be repressive and still try to gain autonomy over what you produce, how you produce it, and all that. But then the question is, the U.S. policies, do they help the people that are under the repression of the Islamic Republic, or do those policies harm them? And I think the answer is emphatically affirmative, that they harm them. They want to see bloodshed so that they can use that under the pretext of human rights and cloak it the way they did with Afghanistan. We got to go save women.
How has U.S. policy to Iran after the revolution, and I know, the U.S. and other Western governments helped overthrow Mossadegh and reinstall the Shah, and and there's been all these sanctions against Iran. Might Iran have become more liberal and less repressive without all these U.S. and other Western sanctions and struggles to strangle it essentially over these years? Do you have any sense of that?
100%. 100%. This does not exonerate those in the Iranian military that open fire on protesters, that torture them, that imprison them. That does not exonerate any of those actions. Those actions need to be brought to justice. But the U.S. is created a world in which the justice is only a specter, is a shadow. When you kill the Ayatollah along with his 12-month-old granddaughter, you're basically saying these people don't deserve justice. They don't deserve to have a court of law. And without getting sidetracked, you have just formed a new government. This is 1980, and your neighbor is attacking you. That's a war you don't have to sell, by the way. The reason why the U.S. government always has to come to the public and sell a war, weapons of mass destruction, communism in Vietnam, communism in Korea, the fundamentalists who want a nuclear bomb in Iran, is because those are all wars of imperialist choice. Iran did not have to sell the war to the population because they saw the Iraqi military marching towards our territory and taking land. For 8 years, Iran lost thousands and thousands of people, 1 million people were lost on both sides. Tons of people are in vegetative state because of chemical weapons used, with the US giving satellite intelligence to the Iraqis and saying these are the areas you're going to bomb. And we suffered $600 billion worth of damage to our infrastructure. That's how we began. That's how the honeymoon stage of the government is. And then you have a period of reconstruction with Rafsanjani, looking at Malaysia as a model. And then Khatami comes along and wants to open things up. And the Americans constantly proved to be unreliable partners, unwilling to negotiate. I mean, Iran gave intelligence to the US in Afghanistan and Iraq, helped them fight the Taliban and fight the Ba'ath government, and in return, Bush called them axis of evil. So what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is, nothing about what Iran has become today under this government was inevitable in 1980. These were choices that the US made by surrounding the country with military bases, creating a state of paranoia. The same thing they did to Cuba. I mean, how many attempts were there on the life of Fidel Castro by the CIA? And then you go around and you say, look at this paranoid, petty Cuban dictator. Again, this doesn't exonerate the crimes of Fidel Castro, but it explains them. That when you live under the shadow of this empire with the biggest killing machine that humans have ever made in the history of mankind, then you just turn around and you say, killing my own countrymen is just the cost I'm willing to pay to be independent. And then the empire comes, uses that killing cynically, even though they don't give a rat's ass about anybody dying, because their own policies create misery and death. And then they say, this guy's got to go, because guess what? If he's killing his own people, you think if he were to acquire a weapon of mass destruction, he wouldn't use it on us? And they do that as they are the ones spilling more and more blood and causing more bloodshed. It is demonic.
Okay, I'm hopping all around here. You're bringing up a lot of subjects. I was going to ask this later, but the Ayatollah Khomeini was not only a government leader, he's a religious leader. And when knowing something about Islam and Shias and the history of Iran, I thought when I heard all this business about the United States going to, wipe out the leadership, which are Shia, could you address that? Something profound that I think, and I wonder if you agree, that the U.S. government or Trump, whoever, completely misses, is that they're going through this series of assassinations of religious leaders, who are respected in Iraq and Pakistan. They're Shia in a lot of places. So I was stunned. But what's your take on that? The fact that the man is, and he's also in his 80s.
Yeah.
The whole morality of it is mind-boggling to me. But going through this assassination campaign. But what's your take on the Ayatollah as a leader? Again, not only for the secular governmental world, but people have an allegiance also on religious grounds.
Oh, 100%. It was such a breathlessly criminal and reckless act to kill the leader of a country who's in his compound, killing other civilians alongside it. It just sets such a horrible precedent. And yeah, a lot of Shia Muslims in the region, of course, feel that this validates their worldview, that this country wants to come for your existence. When I was growing up in Iran, I was 18 when I left. In school, they would always have us chant "Death to America," right? And because I was 12 years old, and 12-year-olds are defiant little shitheads, we never would say it because we just wanted to be little teenagers. And then I came to the US, and then I realized why they say it. Because America, as a colonial enterprise, as an imperial enterprise, not its people, but America, the United States, Inc., literally poses an existential threat to the people of that region. Now, whether you're pro the Islamic Republic or not, bombs are falling on you. Iran does not pose an existential threat to Israel or the United States. At best, they are challenging the hegemony of the U.S. empire in the region, but they don't pose an existential threat to somebody living in Los Angeles or in Iowa. And so that's the human part of it. The other part is in the 1980s when Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Islamic Republic, was ruling Iran, exactly in the same decade as the US was. Look at these Muslim fanatics. Look at how backward Islam is. Look at political Islam is cancerous. Exactly during the same decade, the CIA agents were in Afghanistan, fueling a decidedly Islamic insurgency against the Soviets. They had people going to villages and saying, you cannot send your women, your girls to school, your daughters to school because they need to be out there fighting. In Pakistan, if any Afghan group wanted to register as an official front of resistance, they had to have the name Islamic somewhere in their name, because they believe that Islam is the most robust tool against communism, the green belt. And so this entire argument with religious fanaticism and we're the secular liberal West, it doesn't even withstand the scrutiny of a 5-year-old.
Could you address a little further along this religious line the issue of Ashura and Muharram?
Yeah.
This, and there is Hussein, the martyrdom tradition, all that stuff. And when I saw all this attack on Iran, I can't imagine the people behind the attack understand what's the Iranian people. I know not everybody is that religious, but could you discuss the idea, and it is out there, right, the martyrdom thing, the idea that you will die for God, and if some or whatever, and if you have an outside power, whoever it is, coming in to bomb the hell out of you, with that ideology, it doesn't seem to me like Iran is the kind of country that's gonna just cave at all. Could you discuss that?
I mean, no one caves, because again, going back to wars that sell themselves, right? Afghans didn't cave, Iraqis didn't cave, and they don't necessarily have that idea of martyrdom. But in Iran, you're so right. The idea of martyrdom is deeply rooted in our culture. And as vague of a placeholder the term culture is, when you look at the Shahnameh, you have the character of Siavash, who's the paragon of fairness and of justice, and then he's mapped onto Ali, or he mapped onto Hussein, and so the way Islam kind of enters a new territory and becomes kind of synthesized into it. And that's one of the things I actually love about Shia Islam, right? Because it is full of narratives, whereas in Sunni Islam you don't have a lot of narratives. And so you grow up with the idea of Hussein rose against an army of 1,000, of a tyrannical caliph with 72 people. And they cut water on him, and they assassinate his infant, and basically murder all his men. Whether you're religious or not, as in I feel for Hussein because he was the grandson of the Prophet, is besides the point. It creates a space in which, first of all, men with toxic masculinity can be emotional, can be vulnerable, can cry, they can show bodily reactions to this, they can reenact their own visions of justice, and every single time Ashura has taken on the flavor of its time. When the Shah was in place, Ashura was very much staged with the Shah is Yazid, is the oppressive ruler, and the Ayatollah may be Hussein. But this idea of martyrdom, to standing up for justice, is definitely fueling Iran's righteous resistance to this onslaught.
I'm sorry, for people who wouldn't know what Ashura is, could you briefly discuss or explain what goes on?
Absolutely. So the Karbala, which is today in Iraq, is the stage where Yazid's tyrannical army meets Hussein's army of only 72 men. And Ashura is the 10th day of the month of Muharram, the first month of the Islamic calendar, and on Ashura Hussein is martyred. and so it just marks the beginning, marks the climax of all the rituals of mourning, making food and having processions, passion plays. People open their homes and they collectively make food and they sit down. I mean, it just, the sociability of it is just marvelous, Ron. It's just marvelous. People go door to door, provide warm food or pastries and dessert to their families. What it represents to people it doesn't matter, because individually it varies. But it's a ritual that people have carried out that is at once Islamic and Iranian.
Well, it'd probably be pretty easy to see Yazid, I think he was the evil guy, blend into Donald Trump today. I mean, it's right.
Excuse me, I'm no Yazid, by the way. They say Yazid was doing a great job. He was making Arabia great again, just like my friend.
Sounds like you got another career in line.
I hope not. I'm done with this one. I don't want to start a new one.
Okay, yeah, okay. I wanted to bring up the subject of this elementary school, these little girls. For my wife is not political. She doesn't know much about Iran or Israel, but when she heard about that, she said that's something she could not get past. And anybody who pays attention, whether it's intentional or a mistake or whatever the hell,
besides the point,
could you discuss that? Something like 150 little girls were killed in a bomb, I guess by the U.S. And anyway, given what we've discussed already in terms of martyrdom, in terms of the Hussein, in terms of the Yazid, the evil, I mean, what do you anticipate or understand the general Iranian perspective about that to be? That seems iconic beyond belief.
Oh, it was, I don't even have words to describe it. First, the U.S. has never denied that it was their missiles that did it. Number two, just think of a civilization in the United States that comes in, genocides the Native Americans, and then uses their tribal names, people that it wiped out, to name its own killing machines, the Tomahawk missiles, the helicopter, the Cherokee helicopters. I mean, this is morally depraved behavior. And they hit the school, and they're like, oh, well, we had outdated maps. We didn't know it was actually a school. Then they hit it again, double tap. Then they triple tap it, which is an international crime. They destroyed the urgent care facility nearby. They wanted these people to die. And I really don't understand, Ron. I really don't understand. It must be dehumanization. Why people in this country believe that that is beyond our military. I don't understand. We've done it. We dropped nuclear bombs in Japan, and under the pretense of we needed to stop the war. We didn't have to publicize it, but we put out those pictures of the mushroom clouds on our newspapers. All the while we were suppressing all the images coming out of the massacre of the people and the generations of the deformities. We suppressed all of that, but we put that on the map. That was a statement of thuggery and domination. And this is who we are. We just have to accept that the best thing you could do for the future of life on the planet is to create a multiracial democracy here. Because the only way we can actually gain back our control over labor, over our productive capacity. I mean, let's look at the US, right? Every American city is falling behind on affordable housing. We don't have clean water, clean air. Well, we have tons of SUVs and private jets and bombs because the rich command our labor. We make what they want us to make. Imagine if the rich didn't exist and our jobs could go to reforestation, regeneration of nature, cleaning out, waterways. And this is the problem. Those that care about the climate, about the environment, they should know that the greatest enemy of empire, the greatest polluter, is the killing machine that we call the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm gonna hop around here, okay?
I hop around. So it's only
I'm
fair.
not as organized as I wish, but I got in your experience here with going back to your dismissal or firing, whatever you want to call it, where has been your support?
Oh, it's been tremendous. Tremendous support. Sometimes I'm like, I should avoid using words he uses. No, I mean, the faculty really showed up for me. They tried to create any sort of accountability that they could. They had meetings with the director of the Jackson School. They signed a petition. It went all the way to the dean. The dean responded. They were not satisfied. It went to the provost. The provost responded. People challenged that. And it was also reciprocal. They saw me fighting and making my case. I spoke with any news outlet that was willing to amplify my story. And students also really showed up for me. They protest on campus. There was a student recently that spoke to the Board of Regents. Whether or not they even cared to listen as the student was speaking is, debatable. But no, there's been an incredible amount of support. And my lawyer is a Palestinian from the community who attended my events when I was director of the center. And he reached out to me and he said, I want to represent you pro bono. And so I guess that's one of the advantages of organizing a community and serving that community.
So you're involved in some kind of lawsuit then?
Yes.
Okay, and you can't talk about that, I doubt.
Why not?
What are you after? What's going on then?
I think my academic freedom was violated.
Hmm?
And that's what my legal battle will be about. I don't want this horrible precedent to be set that somehow, if you're in a leadership position, you have to exercise judgment and protect the institution. Who decides what judgment is? That's creating an authoritarian climate. If you look up and you see how the provost behaves or how the director behaves, and then you say, well, okay, so then I should exercise my judgment this way. I mean, it's absolute nonsense. And you've seen this behavior from institutions. I mean, you had the Columbia University president, Shafiq, born in Egypt, fire a queer Egyptian scholar on TV in response to baseless accusations that the anti-Semite Stefanik, who somehow cares about Jewish people, fired this poor man, and he was then deported. I mean, we've seen the moral obscenity that is on display with these institutions. I just cannot allow this precedent to stand, so that younger scholars, other faculty will then say, this is look what happened to him, so we were not going to speak out. No, this has to be litigated in the courtroom.
Where do you get this courage? I've spoken to a number of people in the past about, this is not a new issue, all this, but I have had commentary from scholars who have said that there's an enormous amount of fear in academia about probably a number of things, but the Zionism thing is probably central. Where do you get your courage? It sounds like you're burning the potential. You're burning bridges to Iran. You're burning bridges.
I was going to stand up and get this poster. Let me do that for you. But I'll show you where I get my courage.
Okay. Oh, I have a question about her. Obviously, I did my homework. Okay, could you reconnect, please?
Oh.
And get a little higher, please. Little bit higher.
A little higher.
Yeah, and pointing up at you. Yeah, okay, that's good. Yes, I was going to ask you. I was going to. Could you raise it a little? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna put eyeshadow.
Okay, I was going to ask you about her. All right, let me get a shot of it. Okay. Could you question again? Where did you get your courage, and what does that have to do with it?
From the likes of people like Ayşenur Ezgi, whom I met in December 2023, and then she took a class with me 2024. We began to work very closely with each other. She was just such a sweetheart. Just such a sweet. She was made of dreams. Silly and smart and curious and justice-minded from when she was in high school, going to protest the Dakota pipeline access. I mean, it's just, I was so inspired by her. She was a huge part of the campus liberated zone against genocide in Gaza. And once she tried everything she could to make this campus a better place for those demands, she went to Palestine. She went to Palestine to bear witness, to put her body on the line, and that's literally what happened. She laid down on under an olive tree and bled to death. And I will never be the same after hearing the news of her murder. And I can't remain silent, because the ideals that she had were important to my pedagogy. And then she left the classroom to enact her values in the real world. And she was murdered with zero accountability, zero transparency. Silence is not an option.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. This is in the Israeli West Bank, correct?
Yes, in the city of Beta, near Nablus. She was killed by a sniper 250 meters away on the rooftop of a Palestinian house. And we don't have much information on, I think we may know what the unit was, the IDF unit, but nothing else. We know nothing else.
Okay. Okay, hopping around, that was a question I definitely wanted to touch on. In my past experience, again, going back to the Iranian culture, a lot of, in my view, Iranian culture, the arts, there's a great sense that I experienced of melancholy. Mm-hmm. Do you, in Ney Naval, are you familiar with that, by Ali? That was popular then, and it was, once it makes you want to cry. And I actually, in my experience, I was present for an Ashura event at a university. I didn't know what was going to happen, and they'd turn off the lights, and everybody was crying. And at first I thought they were laughing. I was unfamiliar with where I was, but eventually I grew to understand that. But I wonder am I on the right track with this thing? The melancholy.
I don't know how to speak about it without essentializing Iranians, but it's just true. We have this disposition. It's funny because because I married an American, a Caucasian, these cultural differences stand out now more. So I was playing some music for my mother-in-law, some Nowruz music. So this is marking the spring, the beginning of spring, and she was like, "Why is this all sad? If it's the beginning of the spring, what you listen to Christmas music, it's all jolly and happy." But I think perhaps we're more in touch with that side, whereas my wife, they're very British, very kind of that side of the waspy. You kind of push down the emotions, and in my family, we're all emotional. We get up, we sometimes yell at each other, hug each other, but that melancholy, it has been with me since I can remember. And I don't know whether the grief feeds it or it feeds grief, but it just gives you an opportunity to feel more tender and more soft and more in touch with your emotions. The problem is that Ashura is just one moment, and you can easily then go back to your ordinary life and shut the door on your emotions. But every day is Ashura. Every day could be Ashura.
Hopping around, I'm sorry again.
Don't be sorry.
You may not have any information on this, but I did some research online about this place. There was a controversy in the Jewish Studies department here at the University of Washington when a wealthy Jewish donor, her name was Becky Ben Aroya, donated $5 million to an Israel Studies program But withdrew the money when she discovered that she couldn't control criticism of Israel, along with the donation. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I do.
Could you discuss what you know?
This was the big controversy when I came, I think 2022. Mrs. Benaroya, who's passed away now, who's also well known in Seattle. There are other, it's the Benaroya Hall. There are other endowments that she's made to the city of Seattle. But apparently, there was an attempt on campus to bring Marwan Barghouti here, the Palestinian leader, to the university, which ultimately didn't happen. And so certain, I think, members of the Jewish community went to her and said, listen, we really have to have a huge presence on campus. We have to have an Israel Studies. This is the time for an Israel Studies program. And so that may have been the impetus behind it anyway. So she creates the Israel Studies program, but because academic hiring processes are independent and you can't ideologically meddle, though it depends on what institution you're in. I think University of Washington, for instance, does a lot better than, say, University of Oklahoma, where the donor would have a much bigger say. But they hired Professor Leora Halperin, who is a well-respected historian. They recruited her from University of Colorado in Boulder. And clearly from the outset, there was tension between the donor and the professor. She, first of all, introduced herself as the professor of Israel-Palestine Studies. The donor did not like that. They want erasure of all that is Palestinian. And it culminated into this statement that she co-signed with others, saying that Israel should stop killing civilians and Hamas should also do the same. It was a very moderate, reasonable statement. The donor gets very angry, goes to demands a meeting with the UDAP former president Anna Marie Kause. During this meeting, there was an outside member of a right-wing group giving Professor Halperin ideological litmus tests in the presence of the university, which is wildly inappropriate, and he should have not been allowed to be in the meeting. But the most breathlessly retaliatory and criminal act that the university could do was to say, okay, you didn't like her speech, we'll give you your money back. So they essentially destroyed the Israel Studies program and gave the donor their money back. I mean, if this is not an act of retaliation against a viewpoint, I don't know what is. And the Israel Studies program is done, is over. I mean, that endowment was going to Professor Halperin's research and programming, and the university supposedly restored the part for her research because it was in the contract, but the programming bit is done with. And so they set a terrible precedent. When the university acts like the return section of Costco, like what happens to academic freedom? Of course, then I was next.
If that happens sequentially, then
I mean, this is the climate in which these things are happening, right?
To your knowledge, how many Iranian-born directors of Middle Eastern studies are there in U.S. universities? Any? Few?
There are. Previously, actually, before me, there was an Iranian professor, Dr. Arzu Osanlu, who's now at Princeton, who directed the Middle East Center. The obvious one of the more famous ones is Dr. Abbas Milani at Stanford, who is in a very right-wing ecosystem. The Hoover Institute, this is the place where a war criminal called Condoleezza Rice teaches, where other war criminals like Henry Kissinger have regularly appeared and given lectures. And Professor Milani is the director of the Iranian Studies program, which has, in my opinion, done so much damage to the study of Iran, bringing a very ideological lens.
How so?
Well, Professor Milani is an imperialist. He believes that the U.S. can decide what government, rules the region, and has advocated for war. He has a deeply Islamophobic and Arabophobic view of Iranian history. Is a fantastical view of Iranian history.
Is he Muslim, to your knowledge?
I don't believe he identifies as one.
Along these same lines, then, I know there's an immense diversity in the Iranian diaspora. When I was dealing with Iranians years ago, there's a lot of so-called Shahis down in LA. But I know there's all sorts of people. What's your overview, or what's your sense of the perspectives of what's going on with the U.S. bombing in Iran with the Iranian diaspora? Can you make any generalizations about it, or no?
It's hard to, because I think the polls that have been conducted suggest that more Iranians oppose the war, military intervention, than those that support it. And the camp that supports it is also pretty diverse. Diverse doesn't necessarily mean good. It just means diverse. There are people that are really tied to the Pahlavi dynasty, and mind you, is because the creation of nostalgia is a very powerful propagandistic tool. You've got TV channels like Manoto, which no longer exist, but Iran International, initially funded by the Saudis and now funded by Israel. They really present a totally fantastical image of the Pahlavi dynasty. And then there are those that basically say, well, we're not a fan of the Shah, we're not a fan of his son, but if he is to be our transition leader, if he is to save us from this regime, then so be it. He has our support. And so there is a spectrum of views among the Shahis, the pro-war Shahis. I don't engage them personally because I like my brain cells to stay within my skull. There's trauma, there's PTSD.
Well, could you discuss it? I know a little bit about Iranian history. In the Pahlavi era in the 50s, the Mossad apparently was involved in creating Savak, which was the Shah's brutal secret police. Could you discuss? I presume that's part of the pantheon of Iranian grievance today. Could you discuss the Israeli influence or the Mossad influence? Now too, I've understood.
100%.
What do you think?
Israel is a friend of tyrannical governments everywhere in terms of selling technology, intelligence, training. And what I find really amusing, Ron, is that the IDF has this brand of like bravery. These are like brave soldiers that defend the Jewish state. And when you look at the reality on the ground, is when they got to Lebanon, Hezbollah really did a number on them. They couldn't really fight Hezbollah. On the ground with Hamas, they've really suffered. So in context where you're managing a military occupation, when there's a 7-month pregnant woman on a bus, where I was, 2013, with a child, it doesn't really take much when you're armed to the teeth to come across as all brave when you're managing a defenseless population. And so I'll say that about the IDF. But I'll give you one anecdote. There was an amazing Iranian photographer with the name of Reza Diqqati. Reza Diqqati documented poverty on the outskirts of Iranian cities during the reign of the Shah. The Savak got a hold of him, and he was hung upside down from a ceiling in prison for some 48 hours. He was all bruised up. His crime? Documenting poverty. The Islamic Republic received this security infrastructure from the Pahlavis. Even the nuclear program, the US gave Iran, right? And then their justification for it after the revolution was, wait a second, this is a country that is rich in oil and gas. Why does it need a peaceful nuclear program? I'm sorry, during the Shah's time, there was no gas or there was no oil. How come you gave them a nuclear program? And you just saw that yesterday with Saudis. They signed a treaty that would help them facilitate, enrich uranium. And so the entire infrastructure of a state to police, control, imprison, torture dissidents, assassinate dissidents, execute them, was established by the Shah. Now, critics of the Islamic Republic would say, but the Islamic Republic has taken it to new heights. And that's true. But the context is, Shah was a friend of the United States. There were no sanctions, there were no military bases around. They were not trying to assassinate Iranian nuclear scientists or assassinate Iranian officials. Of course he didn't have to crack down the way the Islamic Republic is having to. That's the difference.
Hopping around. Okay. You are named, with many others, as an offending professor by an organization called the Canary Mission, and you wrote online that you're honored to be on their list. Could you discuss that?
Oh yeah. I studied at Berkeley, and recently they invited me to give the graduation speech for the class of 2025, I believe. And so I got up there and I said, you know, I have a profile on Canary Mission, and there was a Jewish Orthodox professor sitting in the front, Professor Daniel Boyarin. Of course I knew him. So he got up behind the mic and he looked at me, he said, "My profile on Canary Mission is much longer and much older than yours." And so that's the kind of environment that, you know, I come from intellectually, like Jewish, anti-Zionist Jewish intellectuals or non-Zionist Jewish intellectuals played an instrumental role in my intellectual development. But yeah, it's a thuggish, dark kind of initiative online. Who knows where the money comes from? That tries to intimidate, basically, and force employers to fire their employees for the sin of criticizing the state of Israel. And there's other ones too. There's my mentor Hannah Kronfeld is on a website called Anti-Israel Israelis. Again, one of many pieces of evidence that shows you if this is a government that is really fighting for its survival, then why does it behave with thuggery and coercion? Because the truth is not on their side. That's why.
Yeah, I had a question about Chana Kronfeld.
Hannah.
Okay, and she was apparently Jewish, and she was critical of Israel. So could you discuss that influence, and maybe a little beyond that too? Is have you had much Jewish support in your stance? Could you discuss that realm?
The best letter, the most personalized letter that was written in my support was by an Israeli organization. I think Israeli Academics for Equality. And it was written by a human rights lawyer, Smadar Ben Natan, who's a professor at the University of Oregon in Eugene. I've had plenty of support among non-Zionist Jews, and actually including some Zionist Jews. A friend of mine who directs a program here at the university said a Zionist donor, a Sephardic Zionist donor, was outraged when he learned about my dismissal. You just can't put people in a box. I think he has his relationship with Zionism, but he still is able to recognize that there needs to be space for sharp criticism of it. But in terms of Hannah, I mean, I learned so much of my moral clarity from her. This is a woman who would start every single seminar by saying, I refuse to utter the term the Holocaust, for two reasons. One is its Greek origins of offering sacrifice, and I refuse to believe that my people, 6 million of them who perished in the concentration camps, annihilation camps of Europe, were just sacrifices to be made. And number two, to dispel the singularity of the Holocaust as this like event outside of history that can illuminate nothing but itself. No, the Holocaust was very much part of colonial practices that Europeans had done elsewhere in Africa and Asia, and it became the most industrialized killing of people in the European continent. And so she insisted on studying it and framing it as part of all these other genocides, past and present. And for a Jewish woman, an Israeli Jewish woman, to have that much courage and moral clarity. I just told myself, I'm like, I don't know the cost, but I need to work with this person. I need to learn. And to this day, we are in touch regularly. We text every couple weeks.
She has supported you, I presume,
Yeah, of course.
What your experiences here? Okay. Can we, let's see here. Okay.
Yeah, I was saying that the University of Arkansas fired a professor, Iranian professor, Shirin Saidi, under truly a dangerous precedent that she expressed sympathy with a hostile government with which we are at war. Which, have these people heard of the First Amendment? I mean, there's going to be a lot, there are a lot of legal challenges right now. And universities are settling some of them, they're losing some of them, you know, but here's the thing, for them that's just the price of business. Because let's just say I win, and they have to pay me what they have to pay me. What is that? Chump change. It's just chump change and bad press for maybe a week. That's just the price of being in the business where you're complicit in genocide, in the destruction of life on the planet. And even the education, I mean, this is what I want my students to understand. Gaza is not just a matter of, you know, people over there. Look at the same administration at this university that treated me the way it did, with just such harshness and indignity. That's the same institution that is pushing AI down the throats of all the students. What kind of education does that offer? They're abdicating their mission to educate. They're completely going, I mean, this is a machinery to prepare the next generation of not even workers, consumers. The students, there's what, 44,000 students that go here? Imagine the light in the eyes of the AI corporations. They're like 40,000 students training AI for free for us. Then we're going to charge them for those services in 2 years' time. This is what this administration is doing here. And throwing us in the classroom, now go figure out how to evaluate a student given that they're using AI for all their assignments. I mean, it's the classroom. I have been saying for years, the classroom is the last frontier. And brutal honesty and forming a personal relationship with the student, the only antidote to this technofascism that we're descending into. I try to instill pride in my students. You need to have pride in the work you produce. That's why you don't go and use ChatGPT. Forget about that. You have pride? You have any sense of pride, honor? Or you want to outsource your thinking? Because that's exactly what they want. They want to produce a generation of non-thinking capitalist zombies. Because the very people that are creating these tools, I bet you anything, and they themselves admit in interviews, they don't allow their own kids to use them. They have their kids to read Nietzsche and Auerbach. Their own kids, because they want them to grow up thinking. You don't outsource your thinking. AI is just insanity. And this university has its own AI initiative. I mean, I might as well be working for Microsoft, but I'm just getting shit pay at this university. I mean, it's a corporation. It's a corporation just in the most naked fashion.
Okay, I need to change my memory. Again, I came here for a reason, only one reason, to talk to you. Because this reality of your situation getting fired, and I want the real deal on Iran. And I got a few more questions if we can do that.
Yeah, oh my God,
and
for sure.
Okay, and that leads me to this. So, and these are sort of low-level questions, but few Americans know much about Iran, right? Hardly anything. Most Americans think Iranians are Arabs.
And some are.
Huh?
A minority.
Well, a minority, right?
Yeah.
Are you?
I'm not Arab, but I absolutely take no offense. I mean, when people mistake me for Arab, I don't even correct them.
Well, I've known Iranians who take offense. They do take offense. Okay,
that's very unfortunate.
What should Americans know about the Iranian people and/or the Islamic Republic that most don't know? What are the things that the media don't show, or what are the things that are, humanize them?
That's a great question. I actually think that Iranians don't need to be humanized, because to humanize is to assume that you have the agency or the power to present others as human. I actually think it's the oppressors that need to be humanized. I think it's Trumps of the world that need humanization, the Netanyahus of the world, the Khameneis of the world that need to be humanized, and we need to figure out how to humanize them. We need to completely dismantle the system that allows them to just treat human life as collateral damage. The Iranians don't need to be humanized. What I will say about the Iranian government, and I really don't refrain from using the word regime, because it is a loaded term used to present as inherently illegitimate attempts by peoples, like in Cuba, to form their own governing system. Just because the US is capitalist, and capitalism always needs imperial formation, expansion, Puerto Rico, Guam, Hawaii, it doesn't give us the right to flag government systems that we don't like as regimes. I mean, if that's how we want to frame it, then the US and Israel are the regimiest of regimes, literally built on genocide. There's no legitimacy whatsoever in the eye of the very people that inhabited that land. But I will say about the Islamic Republic, a lot of my compatriots view the Islamic Republic as irredeemable demons that will only understand the language of force. I think if that's your mindset, you're going to end up exactly in the same catastrophic quagmire that the US is in right now. Every time they go to the negotiation, then they come back and they want to bypass Iran. Iran reminds them that you signed the memorandum, the surrender document, and then they go and try to use bombs again, and making it harder and harder to bring them into the negotiation table. Say what you will about the Islamic Republic. There are rational actors. They're pragmatic. They're not they're not suicidal. And is it because of the Iranian disposition? No, because they don't have the power of the United States. The U.S. has the greatest military power of any country in the history of mankind, and with it comes this destructive recklessness and lack of restraint. I think any government can be negotiated with. It can be given the incentives to change its behaviors. And when you look at the history of the Islamic Republic, you see a history of change. Women, for instance, did not go back to their houses and veil themselves and say, okay, well, I guess this new government is, depriving us of our rights. No, we actually transformed the very discourse of the king basically conferring upon people certain privileges to a system of rights. The Iranian government system is far more democratic when you look at how the judicial system works, how the legislative system works, than all the U.S. allies has in the region. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel. So this is not a question of democracy. I think there could have been a scenario where, let's say, Obama signs the nuclear deal and actually carries out on his promise, because Obama signed the deal but didn't lift sanctions. And the economy really opens up, and there are new incentives. The Iranian society would be wildly different than today.
How has Iranian society, I mean, I read something online you wrote when you were last there. How has Iranian society suffered under all these sanctions in the years? I mean, I think you mentioned gas or something. Just the struggles, something
the biggest
suffocating
is-
or whatever.
It really is. First of all, complete isolation. Imagine your, their passport already is one of the lowest ranked passports in terms of its, capacity to mobility. But their currency, I'll give you an example. About 10 years ago, we finally decided to go and sell our childhood house in Shiraz. We sold it for $150,000. It was a very difficult decision because all of my memories are there. My last memory with my dad there, and we brought in 50. We left 100 there, and that 100 was supposed to be my mom's retirement account. That $100,000 is now worth $7,000 because of the devaluation of Riyadh. I mean, that's decimated the Iranian society's power to travel, to economically survive in their own country. And this is a tactic that the US has used so widely. Far more lethal, perhaps, than our killing machine is our economic strangulation machine. We did it in Venezuela. We did it in Cuba. Cuba right now, I mean, what is happening to that population is just disgusting. They have no fuel, no power, no drinking water. This is what we do. We punish the population, and we explicitly, if you listen to the testimonies in Congress that the U.S. administration gives, whether under Democrats or Republicans, we say we create such misery that the population would rise and topple the government. Why? Because it's cheap. We don't have to do a thing. No soldier dies, no bomb falls, nothing. And if the population succeeds, great, we take over. If the population doesn't succeed, then we'll use the chaos created and the bloodshed, say, look, this regime they are sowing instability, we got to go and do something about it. And the Iranian society is under enormous duress.
Do you have, presume you do, contacts now with family or friends or relatives or something in Iran? And do you hear on the idea of having bombs drop anywhere and all that? Do you have any sense of their perspective on what they're going through now? I mean, as we're doing this interview, we're on day number 13 or something like that of the Trump administration renewing what they call war on Iran.
I have an elderly aunt in Tehran, and I speak with her whenever she can call me because I can't call her. And what I get from her is a sense of futurelessness. She's, we go to sleep tonight. God knows what happens tomorrow. We shall see. Just complete limbo. I have a dear friend. We've been in conversation for years. He is the one who really introduced me to anti-colonial theory, and it's like just such a brilliant mind on imperialism, critique of colonialism. This guy got so desperate, so miserable, so depressed that in our last message he was expressing support for the bombardment, U.S. bombardment of Iran. And he even said, he's like, I think U.S. empire is evil. I think they're horrible. I just think that maybe being friends with the thug, the police of the world is better than being at odds with it. I just want the status quo done and over with. I'm just desperate. And I understood that desperation. I really do. He was not the friend and colleague that I knew through his work, through our conversations, but the circumstances had changed significantly. I mean, the Iran that I left in 2004, that might as well be a planet in a different galaxy, completely different society. You put me in Mexico right now and I would blend in. That's a society I know far better because I travel all the time. Iran is a complete stranger to me. Because the shared experiences of that public is wildly different from what I experienced. There's a traumatized population, brutalized by their own government, enabled and by Western governments, and now they're in an existential battle. When you hit an oil depot inside a country, inside a city of 9 million people, literally the streams of fire running through a city, that's what an existential battle looks like.
What do you make of news reports that I've seen says that Khamenei's funeral had millions of people, maybe the largest?
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
What is all that about? How do you, in terms of maybe what we talked about already, in terms of Islam, in terms of solidarity, I guess part of it is the Trump administration and those people who decided to embark on all this thought there would be, quote, a revolt against. Could you just, maybe that's the question, what about the idea that you bomb the hell out of them and they'll rise to support you?
I mean, that is such an orientalizing idea, that look at these brown people, because who knew they had institutions, who knew that, I thought there was just the Ayatollah, and you say, he's gone, folks, he's gone, and the regime is gone now. What happened to the knowledge-seeking empire? I thought that's why we created these regional area studies centers like the Middle East Center, to advise these imperialists that, look, it's not just one person. They have built institutions that are durable. There are people in line. I mean, if you, God forbid, the U.S. Congress they would all, die, most likely of old age. That's the end of the U.S. government? And in terms of the funeral, I mean, who knows what the intention of the people that attended was? I mean, first of all, a chunk of the population is religious and likes this government. 20%, 25%. There are people that saw horrors in the worst trench warfare, the last trench warfare of the 20th century. And they saw that the U.S. was on the side of the enemy. So clearly, that's their worldview. And I imagine some people attended the funeral out of just the sheer sense of nationalism. But Khamenei was not a beloved figure. He committed many crimes. He was not a good person at all. I would have loved to see him on trial. I would have loved to see him sentenced by an Iranian judge.
In essence, in a quick overview, what are his crimes? I'm ignorant.
I mean, completely greenlighting repression, and his authoritarian moves. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, funny enough, was the president that really clashed with him. He was challenging his authority because Khamenei was encroaching on his kind of legislative purview, and there was a time when Ahmadinejad was kind of it was not even going to his office out of protest.
And who was he again, for people who don't know?
He was the president of Iran who made horrible anti-Semitic arguments by questioning the validity of the Holocaust and whatnot. And now he was in the news because it turns out the Israelis wanted to actually get rid of the ruling class and put him in charge, which also just shows you the true nature of Zionism, which is they actually want anti-Semites because they're useful enemies. They allow them to manage the region. But yeah, I mean, Khamenei by no metric was this guy a good, respected, well-regarded leader. I mean, I couldn't feel good about his assassination because it was just done in such a horrific way. I would have loved to see him rot in prison.
A general question. Is Iran a democracy? And parallel to that, to the degree you know, is Israel a democracy? I mean, how do they compare? Is that a range of ideas that you have information about or not?
Iran, I think, at some points of its history, in the last 47 years, I think it on the spectrum. It belonged on the spectrum of democracy. I mean, we are kind of leaving that spectrum, but it definitely has democratic components that are dynamic and very democratic. I think that now that is no longer the case, because you essentially have the IRGC, the militarization of the country. You have the new Ayatollah that many people suspect is dead, and so it's the perfect kind of shadowy figure that will never appear in public, and the IRGC can just make whatever decisions and have him rubber stamp it. And again, like the U.S. has a long and documented history of supporting dictatorships, because it's so much easier to deal with a country that is not democratic, because they don't have to go to their, popular will doesn't matter. And the popular will doesn't matter to people here, to the ruling class here. None of the things that the U.S. public wants, the ruling class has ever honored that popular will. And so then how do you expect that they would ever honor the popular will elsewhere? That Israel is a democracy is such a laughable claim that I won't even dignify it with an answer. You have a country with 14 million people, 15 million people, 2 million of them experienced a genocide and are living in horrific conditions. And by the way, for those that say, we only killed 100,000, honestly, just look at the living conditions that they have created for the 2 million. That is only slightly, if better than death. That is horrific. 5 million of them live under an apartheid regime. And then the so-called Arab Israelis, Palestinian Israelis, also don't have equal rights. So how could anybody call that a democracy? They're a democracy in the same way we were a democracy during Jim Crow.
This is just kind of a generic question, but as an immigrant, what are some of the best things about America, and what are some of the worst? And then, in parallel to that, the side question would be the same question for Iran. What are the things you respect and are happy about here? And what are the things that you might despise or whatever? But also the same question for your life in Iran.
America, in the United States, I think remains to be one of the most welcoming countries for naturalized citizens. And I say that with a huge asterisk, obviously, because we have the ICE-covered Nazis going around putting people in concentration camps. But people that are lucky enough to come with papers, like we did, at least living on the West Coast, as I have in the entire 22 years that I've been here, I never felt like I am at somebody else's home, that this is not my home. That welcoming nature is, I love that. I don't think if I were to live for 50 years in France or Germany, I would ever be made to feel that I too can be German or French. I don't think so. The thing I hate the most about the US is urban planning. Oh my God, the over-reliance on cars, how unwalkable cities are, how much just this fake notion of like everybody needs their own car, their own freedom. Cars are chains. They don't free you. They chain you to insurance companies and parking and a million other things. When I was living in Mexico after my graduation, I just loved walking everywhere and going to plazas and seeing little abuelos playing chess and playing soccer and dancing. I mean, that's just life. Life. American cities, with the exception of New York, just don't have that urban life because all the streets are designed for cars. The cars are so big. They have low visibility. You feel like, if you get hit by a car in Iran, you're going to go to the hospital a month later, you're back on your feet. I mean, these fucking trucks, if they hit you, you're done. Khalas. Bye. And in terms of Iran, the things I hate the most, I think when I was in Shiraz, I just hated how much pollution there was. People just polluting the streets and the air, because it's exactly that American lifestyle that everybody aspires to. Instead of investing heavily in public transportation, people buy cars. And the thing I loved is having neighbors, because neighbors are just family. In 2007, when I went to Iran, the entire month I was there, I was just staying in my neighbor's house, fed every single day, the entire time. I miss that, the hospitality, warmth of people.
I interviewed an Armenian from Iran years ago. He talked about this. He's talked about how in America you don't even know who your neighbor is, and in Iran, everybody knows everybody's outside, and here everybody's indoors, and all that. The Shah of Iran's son, Reza Pahlavi, has a following here to some degree, and maybe in Europe. How realistic is that he has much support within Iran itself?
It's hard to quantify, but I would just say that those that are supposedly his sources of support, because he's made such a morally compromised bargain with them, the United States and Israel, just look at how they speak about him. Trump has said numerous times that this guy is not manly enough, he's not suitable. Israel was tapping Ahmadinejad, someone who denies the Holocaust, to lead. Nobody takes this guy seriously because he's a loser. He's been living in the US for 47 years, born in 1960 like my mom, has not finished a bachelor's degree, has not run a gas station. He all these years later, his English is uninspired and flat. His Persian is even more underwhelming because he spoke French with his mom and dad. So he didn't even have a Persian tutor when he was in Iran living in the court. He's completely detached from that society. He has voiced his preference for wanting to live in the US or remotely helping Iran transition. I mean, he is a clown through and through. And he's poisoning the Iranian diaspora. And one good example of it was last month when the Iranian national team came to Seattle. Instead of advocating for them, because they were treated horribly, they had to fly to Tijuana and stay in Tijuana, even though their games were in the US. He kept saying, this is the IRGC team. These people are not our people. This is not our team. And why do we only expect African and Asian teams to be held accountable for the crimes of their governments, and then everybody just cheers for the colonial government of France that, or Spain? Lamine Yamal, the teenage player, the sensation, comes from Equatorial Guinea that Spain literally has erased culturally. There's some questions to ask those governments or the U.S. team, and so this is what he's good at now, just poisoning the diaspora. Horrible human being.
Jumping around, I've interviewed a number of Muslim women in the years past who have argued, some Shia, who have argued that the Western world is more repressive to women than the Islamic Republic. Okay, there's an argument there. What's your perspective on the status of women in Iran?
Oh, I can't comment on that. I just don't know enough. I don't know enough
Really?
to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, what's the reputation or stereotype of Jews in Iran? I know there's still some Jews there,
Yeah.
and maybe you could discuss a synagogue got bombed, right?
By Israel.
What's that about? And then, Jews in Iran, let me throw that out.
I remember in high school, we had a Jewish student in my class, and I was very jealous of him because my least favorite subject was religious ethics. I'm kind of like, oh my God, okay, fine. And this guy was excused because he was not Muslim. I'm like, I want to go outside and play with him. And it's like, no, he's Jewish. You know, he's excused from that. But the stereotypes were that they're greedy, that they're, money hungry.
Same as European.
Yeah, all those horrible stereotypes. So when you look at Jews in the Middle East, Jews in North Africa, of course, anti-Semitic bigotry and anti-Semitic crimes have existed in all of those places. But I mean, you look at the Pale of Settlement in the Soviet world, you look at the annihilation camps of Europe, and not just all of those governments, by the way, were Nazis, they collaborated with the Nazis. I mean, what Jews suffered in the Middle East and North Africa pales in comparison to what the Soviets and Nazis did to European Jewry. Nothing. That's the original sin, that they tried to annihilate these people. And then in order for them to establish their European credentials, they had to become colonizers. So then they sent them to the east with the blessing of the European powers. They established their satellite campus in Palestine. But I mean, I don't think anybody, the type of industrialized killing, concentration camps, I don't think any Jewish person has experienced anything like that, from Afghanistan or Bukhara to Morocco to Algeria to Iran.
Do you have any knowledge of, I know there's a few thousand Jews still
10,000.
left, and it would seem that with Israel and Zionism, they would be under suspicion. Do you have any knowledge of their experience? And again, the synagogue bombing, what was that about? Any idea? What's your perspective?
I mean, the Zionists have a documented history of collaborating with nativists in places like Morocco and Iraq to create widespread fear, so that those populations would be compelled to travel to Israel and make Aliyah. But I honestly don't know what it's like to be Jewish in Iran. I don't imagine anybody is having a good time, whether they are Jewish or not. And in terms of the suspicion of being Zionist spies, I mean, that would be a lazy and just stupid trope, because clearly Israel has spies all over the Iranian establishment, and I don't think they're Jewish. There's tons of people that the Islamic Republic has pissed off that would be willing to say, yeah, pay me and I'll go give you intelligence. Jewish Iranians are older than Muslims. They predate Islam in Iran. They feel very strong ties to their Iranianness, including the ones in places like Los Angeles, who tend to have deeply Zionist beliefs that I find abhorrent, but they're still very much Iranian.
What about the synagogue that got hit? What do you know about that?
I don't know much about it.
Okay.
I just, I mean, it was such a good representation of what this war actually is.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, I don't know how much time we got left. You've seen this cartoon, perhaps. Have you?
I haven't, but I imagine
You haven't?
it's about 9.
Well, it's very funny. It's called Academia's, I don't recall exactly where I got it. And you're here. You are one of the...
I'm there.
You didn't know this?
I haven't seen
Look, they have you. You look older there. There you are.
Oh my God.
And here's what it says about
I
you.
look
Okay, it's
that
some
aggressive?
Zionist site that it's Academia's Iran lobby, and what it says. Here's what's coming out of your mouth. It says director removed, and out of your mouth in the little cartoon it says anti-Israel, anti-US, and pro-Iran. You haven't even seen this?
The first two are correct. I am anti-Israel and anti-US.
Okay, all right, and you're not pro-Iran. Well, what's your take on that? Well,
I'm an anti-capitalist, which would by default makes me anti-US and anti-Israel, and if you want to go that way, anti-Iran too. Iran is a crony capitalist country. I mean, look at how they have created water bankruptcy. I mean, they're not that different.
Okay.
But I had not seen it.
You're not seeing that. I'll leave
I
it.
actually like to see it. Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's finish this, and I didn't even give it. It's online.
Not a flattering caricature.
Well, no, it's well done.
really
It's actually,
looked at,
it's well done. It has a number of individuals who have spoken out
I'm
against.
in good company then.
Pardon?
I'm in good company.
Not all of them are Iranian, by the way. Let me ask you this, and this is just a general question. And there seems to be a sort of media game being played about American gas prices. It's a deal. I mean, coming here was horrible.
Oh my God.
In relation to the attack on Iran and all that. But the media, everywhere you look on the popular media, it virtually ignores the human cost and suffering of the Iranian people, in this particular case, and let alone Gaza and all that. What's your perspective of all this? I mean, it seems like when you listen to the news, you're listening to kind of a chess game or something, and not the detail, like there's all those little girls who got slaughtered. Yeah, I heard about it, but I don't know any of their names. But the like few servicemen who just got killed by Iran, their names are coming out pretty regular. You know what I mean?
And that blood is on Trump's hands.
Yeah. Well. So again, it's the question of the dehumanization. You discussed it a bit, but what's your sense about all that? It's most Americans don't hear or see details of people getting slaughtered or murdered or heads blown off. Pardon me, but they hear about gas prices, and stuff like that. And
It's what being inside an empire feels like. Being inside the belly of empire. Every autumn we have a course called The Gateway to the Middle East, and different faculty come give lectures on different parts, Turkic, the Turkic world, Hebrew and Israel studies. I do the Persian Iranian studies. The first lecture, though, the opening lecture I usually give, and I tackle the question of Orientalism, which is the premise, the fundamental premise of it is these people in the East are inherently, biologically incapable of self-governance.
Is that Edward Said based?
That's Edward Said, but even people before him had levied similar critiques of this, of the ideology that animates the knowledge production of the East. And honestly, I think that hasn't changed at all. I think that, unfortunately, ordinary Americans don't feel that people in the East should have the right to self-governance, right to self-determination. And so when gas prices went up, I thought to myself, I'm like, well, at least maybe this will light a fire under the belly of Americans to oppose this war. But that didn't really happen. And so, yeah, we only matter to them when it hits their pockets, and it's just deeply dehumanizing. And so that's why I think it's very important to listen to veterans that come from those places. And I have a lot of students in the past and also today that are veterans, and they are some of the most outspoken critics of U.S. imperialism, because they have seen what U.S. imperialism does to people, and they have seen what we've done in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Yemen, and those are the voices that the U.S. does not want to hear from. Like that guy that yelled at George W. Bush, "You lied and my best friend died," and they threw him out, discarded him like he was garbage, lifted him by under his shoulders and threw him out. This is what this country thinks of veterans, really.
How are Iranians portrayed in American popular culture? I'm sure this has to do with Orientalism in your view, but by the mass media and all that. And then the addendum to that is why.
I think so far there have been two options. You could either be a terrorist, or you could be a wealthy, vain reality TV star, in the mold of the Shahs of Sunset. I mean, look, we know this. We know this from black scholars who have shown us that Hollywood has always been an instrument of U.S. imperialism here and abroad. We have seen the glorification of cops. We've seen how these cop glorifying films and TV shows have used black people as a way of legitimizing the police brutality. We've seen the glorification of U.S. military-industrial complex. You remember the movie Sniper. Hollywood is absolutely an extension of empire, and so that is just to be expected. The way they dehumanize black people, why would they not dehumanize Iranians?
Let me ask, this might be more sensitive or a little off the bounds here, but Hollywood is dominantly Jewish. There's books on the subject, right?
Yeah.
And so the question I would pose to you, just to ruminate a little bit here, is for all those who are advocates for the issue of challenging white supremacy, what about Jewish supremacy, which is integral to Hollywood, popular culture, 100%. The internet,
the publishing world?
Publishing world. Let me ask you that, and this is a hot one, because this is where if you say this kind of stuff, what I'm saying now, I say it's a fact that Jews are influential in popular culture. Oh, you're an anti-Semite.
You're an anti-Semite.
So what's your take on the Jewish supremacy thing within the context of the white supremacy thing?
I think it goes back to capitalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
That ultimately they're all wrapped into one. That we need to fight for the survival of the colony, of the Jewish colony in the Middle East, and all that it represents in terms of interests, the defense industry, the security industry. I mean, I remember in Palestine, I was in a political tour, and right outside of Ramallah, our van stopped, and the political guide, the tour guide, had us step out of the van, and he said, "I'll tell you why the occupation has lasted 50 years. Look around you." And he started pointing. He's like, you see those cameras? They cost this much. They're made in Canada. You saw those barriers, the concrete. You see the trenches. You see the outfits. I mean, everything. The military occupation is a very lucrative business. And so for Hollywood, for Zionists that live in the U.S., it is ideological because capitalism is ideological. It's all rolled into one. And they do have outsized influence. I mean, Jewish Americans are overrepresented in politics, they're overrepresented on TV, they're overrepresented in cinema, they're overrepresented in the finance industry, they're overrepresented in the publishing industry. That's just a statement of fact. Now, can you then generalize and say that all of those Jewish folks that are operative in those industries are carrying out a unified agenda? I don't believe that's the case. That all of them have a singular belief of how their Judaism resonates with Zionism. I don't think that's the case. But you can definitely see the influence of money and capitalism in that. And I don't think that is a wrong thing to say. I mean, look at how Congress, the black women are the least represented people in the United States, demography in the United States in the Congress, and then compare it to, say, Jewish men. The numbers speak for themselves.
Do you still have some time?
Yeah.
I still have a few things I'd like to
Sure.
touch. Yeah, good.
I'm good.
You're interesting. Your experience in Israel and the West Bank, apparently you went there.
I did twice.
Could you discuss what did you see, what happened?
First time it was only a few days from Cairo. I took a bus with my girlfriend at the time through the Sinai, and then we entered into Eilat and went all the way to Jerusalem. It was just, enough to see some sights. But then in 2013 I returned as a Berkeley grad student with a scholarship from the US government to study Arabic. And I didn't even know whether they would let me in, but I was detained for 7 hours and questioned. And then they finally let me in. And the 2 months I was living in the West Bank and traveling across the country, I saw just what Zionism has done to Palestine, which is shattered it into a million different sets of circumstances, living conditions, like within the same. For instance, Ramallah, sometimes you're walking on the street and you could be forgiven to forget that this is under military occupation, on some days. But right next to it is a refugee camp. You can smell catastrophe in the air. You could see in the very architecture of those camps that this was all set up temporarily. There were tents, and these people just never got to return to their homelands. You go to Jenin, a city in the north, you can still smell the massacres that IDF committed there. And so Zionism, which argues that Jews are all a unitary people and ultimately they all gravitate towards Israel, that is their homeland, has created a diaspora in Palestinians, both within and outside, that are just really disconnected from one another. I mean, for instance, we just take for granted that, oh yeah, Gaza and the West Bank. No, there's no Gaza and the West Bank. That's Palestine. That's Palestine. The two of them were violently, criminally, illegally separated. The same way East Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the economic hub of Palestine. They violently, illegally severed it from the West Bank. So it's all about fragmentation. Like, reduce these people, take away the familial bonds, reduce them, just, grind them down so they would pick up and leave. It is an apartheid system that I think makes South Africa look like a walk in the park. I mean, it's just horrific. And in terms of being an Iranian, traveling in Israel, I could be Israeli. Israelis look, they have diverse population. So often I would blend in, but when they would find out that I am Iranian, their behavior would change very quickly, for the worse.
The Israelis or the Palestinians?
The Israelis.
Ah.
The Israelis.
Along these lines, can you discuss, and this is a huge subject, but just kind of perhaps summarize it for a lot of people who wouldn't know about this, the dynamic between the Shia and Sunni in the Middle East, the historical tensions between them, and how Israel exploits that. Okay, that's a huge, I could go on forever, I recognize that. Can you kind of do an overview summary of, sorry.
the Shia Sunni, the Shia Sunni divide, really you can't, the best place to start is not the advent of Islam. The best place to start is actually the formation of the Safavid dynasty in the 16th century. Because this is the founders of the Safavids, this Turkic dynasty, were Sunni themselves, but because of political expediency, given the fact that they had the Sunni Uzbek Khanate in the north, they had the Ottomans, to the west, which of course were Sunni, they imposed Shiism as a state religion. So Shiism became the religion of the state, and it was a violent, top to bottom process. They brought in clergies from Lebanon, and there was a whole transition. It was political in nature, obviously, and so you kind of begin from there that the Iranians previously were predominantly Sunni. And so what I'm trying to say is that the divide is not this timeless theological dispute. Right? And people have constantly tried to weaponize it. Saddam did, the Ayatollah did during the war, the US does it, Israel does it. It's very cynical to do that. But I will tell you that growing up with a very proud Shia grandma, she did harbor a lot of bigoted views towards Sunnis. So one of the curse words she would often use was Omar's head, and Omar was one of the righteous caliphs, right, that succeeded the prophet.
Well, bigotry is endemic, I think, to ethnic.
Yeah.
Not just. Yeah. I've heard that from Christian Iranians. You familiar with that? If a Christian touches the water, then Shia Muslims gotta do some.
Awful.
So it's like idiotic. This is every culture has these kind of things.
Well, I asked my grandma. I said, "Your father was a cleric. Did he have Baha'i friends?" And I asked that because in college I was surrounded by Baha'is, and I love the community. I'm not, unfortunately, as in touch with them now. But she said, "Yeah, my father he had a Baha'i neighbor." And when he would bring him oranges from his garden, my father would even eat them. I'm like, wow, how open-minded of him. As opposed to what? And it's like, well, most people would throw them away. Like, that is just so backwards.
Following all that up, I mean, this, I just wanted to touch on this. So Iran is dominantly, not all, Shia, right? And the Palestinians are dominantly Sunni. So how does that play out in the Muslim world? What's your take on, it's Iran and Hezbollah, the Houthis of Yemen, Shia, more or less, right? And the Sunnis, Saudi Arabia, whatever. So in terms of Palestine, there's actually been military action from the Shia, and very little. What's your sense of what's going on there?
Well, Yasser Arafat was the first foreign leader that visited Iran in 1979. The new government received them, and from the outset, the Ayatollah Khomeini and Yasser Arafat did not see eye to eye, because Khomeini was interested in this transnational Shia revolutionary discourse of, he would always say the path to liberate, Jerusalem runs through Baghdad or things like that. He had these, had those expansionist aspirations. And Yasser Arafat was like, I'm a leader of a national movement. Palestinians, whether Christians or Muslim, Shia, Sunni, I'm a leader of a national one. And then when Saddam attacked, he sided with Saddam, and that really put a massive chasm between Iran and Palestine and the PLO. And so, the Shi'i Sunni dimension is just one among so many other factors that determines shifting alliances in the region. So looking at it through that prism alone, I think would yield kind of wrong-headed conclusions.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
This is going out into another realm briefly, but I'd like to ask you that clearly your politics are on the left. Okay?
No way.
And so, so there's a lot of issues there. Maybe we can't discuss them, but one thing I want to ask is from the political right, the political right does not comprehend common cause from the political left in this country and Islam, in the sense that, with Islamophobia, all these things, the political right would argue that Islam is largely anti-gay, repressive of women, all that. Okay, I presume you're familiar with all this discourse, argument. But so what's your understanding of the progressive activists often conflating their activism with a defense of Islam, which is considered by many, to be an oppressive issue? So how do you reconcile, not necessarily you, but how does this progressive political perspective reconcile all this stuff? There's contradictions here.
I think if one truly cares about those causes, and then one must be very serious about tackling them. And I think that homophobia is definitely an issue that is across predominantly Muslim societies to various degrees. It's criminalized, discriminated against. But then you look at the United States of America, vehemently transphobic, homophobic. The right itself is deeply homophobic, and this is a tactic that Israel uses, pinkwashing. Claim that Israel is a haven for Palestinian gays because they're oppressed, and then when Mossad finds out that a certain Palestinian is queer, then they use that against them to blackmail him to spy on his fellow Palestinians. Otherwise, will out you in front of your family. And so this is a cynical game. But overall, I don't believe in the notion that you should not get your dirty laundry out in front of people that may have an ulterior motive to use it against you. If you firmly believe that we should live in a society that will not judge and prevent people from participating according to their gender or sexual orientation, then you will oppose it no matter where it's done and under what rubric it's done. And I think women in the West in the US particularly, are repressed I think depriving them of the right to the reproductive rights is profoundly misogynistic and anti-human, and women are oppressed in the Middle East. Is the common denominator Islam? Is the common denominator Christianity? You know, I find it too facile.
What is your path to your political perspective today, coming from Iran, especially as an 18-year-old young man? How did you arrive with this political perspective here now? What happened? Who? Where?
Who radicalized
Give me names.
Who indoctrinated me? I don't know. It was genuinely self-discovery. But I mean, I'm a product of the American educational system. I went to community college in San Diego. I did got my BA in San Diego State, PhD in Berkeley, and so that humanist tradition with all of its flaws and shortcomings and blind spots, that's what has shaped me. And also traveling. Like traveling in Latin America was really formative for my understanding of imperialism and talking to people. I think setting foot outside the United States is so important. Puts everything in perspective.
Have you had are there any stereotypes you've personally faced as an Iranian? Have there been any incidents in your life here, negative experiences with people?
Yeah, people assume you're violent.
Right away?
Yeah.
I mean, you've had that experience.
Yeah, people.
They step back from you?
Yeah, they just, even my in-laws, they're like, well, when they found out that she was dating an Iranian, they're like, well, he will have to prove himself. But they gave me a chance. They gave me their open hearts. But yeah, people really, they either think that you're wealthy and your mom drives a white BMW and golden chains and rugs on the wall, and I think I defy those stereotypes. I hope.
In 2024, Fox News reported that the group Stop Anti-Semitism named the University of Washington at Seattle as one of the most anti-Jewish colleges in America. What's your perspective on that charge?
I think that it is a cynical move to use Jews as a cudgel for authoritarian purposes, and this is what this administration has shown itself to be capable of, because all of this generates anti-Semitism. Because when you constantly have hearings in Congress on safety of Jewish students, of anti-Semitism, a lot of people that are less educated or less in contact with Jewish Americans would think, well, what is so special about this group? Why is this government, why is this administration really trying to shield this group from, protect this group? And ultimately it creates resentment wrongly towards American Jews, because they don't care about Jewish safety. And to them, the only right type of Jewish person is a capitalist Zionist. All the other ones might as well not even be Jewish. I mean, Trump has labeled Schumer, who is one of the most loyal and reliable supporters of the State of Israel, as a Palestinian. He uses it as a pejorative, as if like he's not Jewish, he's a Palestinian. And so I don't think those claims have any merit. I just would completely dismiss that. That is not the experience of my Jewish colleagues in my circle on this campus.
Could you address the Shah of Iran, the deposed Shah, used to celebrate being Aryan. Could you discuss that, and does that have any play today anywhere in the Iranian community?
Sadly, it does.
And what is that about?
It is a combination of the Aryanist discourse that was ascendant in the 1930s in Europe, that was imported and resonated with Iranian intellectuals at the time, and not just Iranians, but also Afghan, Turkish. A lot of intellectuals across the region wanted to place themselves in this hierarchy of civilizations, and Aryan, white, this idea that certain groups have shared physiological, cognitive, and behavioral characteristics, and that Aryans were the civilized ones, unfortunately, really shaped the culture and the psyche. It came at the cost of the erasure of black Iranians. Iranian officials were even communicating with Nazi officials about the authenticity of Iran's claim to Aryanism. Nazi officials actually validated Iran as an Aryan nation, but of course seen as inferior. There's even stories of Jewish Iranians that were traveling in Europe that feared ending up in the annihilation camps of the Nazis, and so the Iranian statesmen basically secured passports for them that would allow them to move around without being caught and suspected of being Jewish, because the Nazi officials determined that Iranian Jews are Aryan. I mean, it's... I'm not saying that my beliefs don't have any sort of fantasy or mythology. That's what we do. Humans cling to different meaning-making mechanisms to make sense of their world and to create their world. But what I'm saying is this type of myth only aims to exclude and suppress diversity and cast shadow on racial others. I hate those fantasies. How about fantasies that unite and include and, you know, yeah, the whole Aryan discourse, unfortunately, is very, very resonant among Iranians. They consider themselves Aryans.
Even today?
Even today.
And is that inferred then a racial superiority thing, all that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just have one last question, and that question, you've been great. I really appreciate your time. But what have I missed? What would you... I think I've touched on quite a bit, and you're pretty informed about Iran, Iranians, Israel, U.S. foreign policy. If there's anything you'd like to add that you think is important that I missed. Or whether you just want to throw something out that isn't important or I didn't miss, whatever.
That the status quo was not inevitable and is not written in stone. There's nothing that says we shall have militarism and violence in perpetuity. There are different ways to create different futures that are free from that. And I want to say to the youth, people that look at what's happening in the world and they just feel utter defeat and despair, is that we win every single day, but those wins don't stand out to us. We push back, we resist, and that matters a lot. And you know, I may not necessarily have hope that the favorable outcomes will happen when it comes to securing a livable planet, but I have agency, and I sure as hell intend on using my agency to fight the good fight, to advocate for good causes, because nothing changes that calculation. The US could, God forbid, drop a nuclear bomb on Iran. The calculation never changes for me. I will wake up the next day and advocate for saving what can be saved and for militating against capitalism, because it's an anti-life system that devours itself ultimately, because there will be nothing left but itself to devour.
Okay. I thank you, sir. Could you put it up and let me get your picture next to this? Is okay there.
It's just hilarious.
There you are.
I don't wear suits.
In the cartoon. You look a little older.
I look like a crow with rabies. You know? Oh my God, man!
And these other guys, all these others.
No, I'm not interested in their depiction. That's I don't know if my wife would find that to be a turn on, quite honestly.